All right, we're just about ready to start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon session of the IPU webinar on the Arms Trade Treaty at 10, Parliamentary Engagement for a World Free of Armed Violence. This webinar is being interpreted in Spanish, French, Arabic, and English. To access interpretation, you can click on the little globe icon on the taskbar of Zoom and select your language of preference. We are joined today by an esteemed panel of experts, and our moderator today is going to be Mr. Marc Finot, who's a former French diplomat who was seconded to the Geneva Center for Security Policy from 2004 to 2013. He worked there since and continues as an associate member. At GCSP, Marc Finot was leading activities related to arms proliferation. He is altogether an absolute expert on the Arms Trade Treaty and arms proliferation. It is a pleasure to have him as our moderator. Marc Finot, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arthur, for these nice words of introduction. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to this webinar celebrating 10 years since the entry into force of the Arms Trade Treaty. And at the same time, today is the 10th of December, which is the International Day of Human Rights, and coincides with the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize today in Oslo. And it's not by accident that we can relate to these various issues or initiatives. And in particular, the Arms Trade Treaty is like several other treaties that have been adopted since the end of the Cold War on anti-personnel landmines, on cluster munitions, and more recently on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. These initiatives were all initiatives coming from civil society. And of course, parliamentarians played a role in supporting and promoting these initiatives so that governments could eventually negotiate and adopt them. So this is how it happened with the Arms Trade Treaty. Of course, we'll hear from Hinway the role of Control Arms, which was a coalition of NGOs, but also, of course, I would say sponsor states or key states, such as Argentina, of course, ably represented today by Ambassador Carlos Mario Foradori. And it's important to recall the fact that this is not a sort of traditional disarmament treaty. This is not about prohibiting or eliminating conventional weapons. This is about regulating their international trade, import, export, brokering, etc. And one of the purposes of this treaty, I think it's important to remember every time we mention this treaty, is to reduce human suffering. This is the first time, actually, that this was included in an article of a treaty. So, of course, we can, rejoice in the fact that we've, celebrating 10th anniversary of the treaty, with, of course, growing number of states parties, over 100, and but at the same time, we realize that since then, conflicts have been going on with a lot of civilian victims directly affected by the use of conventional weapons. And we can see also ongoing illicit trafficking, illicit transfers of conventional weapons, and of course a number of key states, either exporting countries or importing countries, that are still missing, still not bound by the treaty. And this is a sign of concern. But it should, I think, also be an encouragement for all of us, civil society, NGOs, academia, and most of all, parliamentarians who are actually acting in this field. And we'll hear later also from Mr. Cegeni, also president of the Parliamentary Forum on Small Arms and Lethal Weapons, again, about the role parliamentarians can play in this field. So I'm really honored to be joined by three distinguished panelists. I will briefly introduce them. Already mentioned Ambassador Carlos Mario Ferradori, who is at the same time the permanent representative of Argentina to international organizations here in Geneva, but he also happened to be the current president of the 11th Conference of States Parties to the Arms Trade Treaty. As you may know, states parties meet every year to take stock and review the implementation of the treaty. Ambassador Ferradori is a distinguished diplomat who served as Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Argentina, G20 Sherpa, ambassador to Zimbabwe, Guatemala, counselor in Washington, and he played, of course, a key role in negotiating agreements, such the dispute, the border dispute with Chile, or agreements on the Malvinas Islands. And of course, as president of the Conference of States Parties of the ATT, he continues to support the universalization of this treaty through advocacy. And of course, it is another testimony of the important role played by his country. Let's remember that one of the key negotiators of the treaty was Ambassador Garcia Moreton, who really played a historic role in adopting most of the text of the treaty. And now the head of the ATT Secretariat is a former Argentinian official and then civil society expert, Ms. Karina Solmirano, the first female official who's heading this important position. So I will start with Ambassador Ferradori, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. So Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank deeply to the Inter-Parliamentarian Union to give us this opportunity, this chance. I think it is really very important for the purpose of the universalization and the implementation of the treaty. Thank you so much, Mr. Marc Finot, and I want to greet specifically to all these participants in this meeting. And I think that the ATT family really is producing a very important impact in terms of trying to, in many ways, to explain the virtues of this treaty worldwide. And I think I really thank you so much, all these NGOs and all these really these organizations who help us a lot. This 10th anniversary is really a timely moment to reflect on achievements and challenges that we have to face in the future. And we also must admit that despite the progress that's been registered, there are obstacles hindering the treaty's full potential, because really we have a lot of potential. So the ATT operates now, as we know, in a very polarized global context, but its mission is clear, and is to serve as a tool for peace, accountability, and mainly for the protection of human lives. And that is why for us the universalization to the treaty is really essential. Each non-party state represents a gap in the effort to regulate arms transfer and prevent misuse. As we all know, it is very important to complete this puzzle, and we are really very committed to do so. That's why the universalization for us is a priority, is the key to the ATT success. And I always saying something that is very important to take into account. The fact that we are focusing in universalization does not necessarily dismiss the other pillars of the treaty, like the implementation, for example. That's really very important to take into account that we can walk and chew at the same time. We are not just only doing one task, but actually paying attention to all these other pillars of the treaty. And well, we know that we have 116 state parties, and that's encouraging, but gaps remain in regulating global arms trade flows yet. As we know, there are significant exporters and importers that are still outside of the treaty. Currently, for example, 66 of the top 50 global exporters have ratified the ATT, but 59% of arms trade volumes remain outside its framework. So among importers, on the other side, 52% of the top 50 are state parties, while 18% are signatories, but however, 42% of imports come from non-party states. Colombia's recent accession is really a promising development, demonstrating the impact of targeting outreach effort. Some of you already know, because we have some exchange in the last weeks, that in the coming weeks, we will assist with the treaty implementation to Colombia, sharing experiences and lessons learned. And this initiative is supported, and we thank you so much, by Germany, and highlights the importance of the international cooperation. And here, I think is something very important to take into account. The fact that Colombia has recently joined the treaty is very encouraging in the region, because when you take a look at the map in the South America region, you will see that there are essentially 3 countries that haven't signed the agreement yet. One is Venezuela, the other is Bolivia, and the other one is Ecuador. And we have very important discussions. I have discussions with representative, actually the permanent representative in New York of Ecuador. I also had meetings with the people from the Ministry of Defense in Cambodia a week or so ago, and also obviously in Geneva, because it is very interesting to analyze the situation in Ecuador as a paradigm of the importance of the treaty universalization. You look at the map and you see Colombia already is a member, you see Brazil, and you see Peru. So it is obvious that all those who love the illegal trade of arms and everything will use Ecuador as a platform, it's going to be like a black hole, which is not convenient for Ecuador, not being part of the treaty, particularly with all these stories and all these problems in the region and so on and so forth. So you can see there that how is very interesting to combine. And as I was saying before, universalization with implementation. And why? Because as I said, in this week, there are people of Argentina assisting Colombia to implement the treaty after being ratified just now. So in other words, centerpiece is implementation. At the same time, we're working in the universalization, trying to persuade Ecuador, which are really already persuaded of the importance of being part of the treaty. So in other words, this is a complementary factors, the implementation with the universalization. This can be applied to other regions as well. And one of the points is that we also emphasizing in the universalization in the Asia Pacific area, because as we know, it's our deficit. We are very conscious of that, and that's why we made a big promotion of the ATT during the course of the meeting on the anti-personal mines on the Convention of Ottawa 10 days ago in Siem Reap in Cambodia. So we were really very much committed to promote the ATT on that in that event. The role of the parliamentarians. The role of the parliamentarians are really essential for the universalization because they are responsible for passing legislation and building the political consensus and ensuring the alignment with the ATT obligations. And beyond the ratification, the parliamentarians foster accountability by overseeing arms control system, promoting transparency and preventing diversion. In our presidency, we are really very much committed to work very closely with the Inter-Parliamentarian Union. And this is not only this first example. During the course of the last General Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentarian Union, we actually were participating in a special event where we were among many parliamentarians promoting the ATT and make conscious of the parliamentarians' role, essential role in many factors. I mean, first of all, because what is a parliamentarian after all? It's a politician. And it's a politician who also can persuade either from the opposition or being official member of the government in a way to persuade the executive branch to sign the agreement, or obviously to encourage the other colleagues of the parliament to also do whatever they need to do to approve domestically the treaty to be actually, after all, ratified. So that's why it's really very important, because it's the base of all. And persuading and creating the conscience of the parliamentarians is really very, very important by all means, because it's the representative of people in the countries, and also because of the role that they have in order to persuade and in order to actually execute what is really very important, which is the approval of the Congress domestically, of the treaty domestically. And strengthening the implementation is, as I said, is really very important, because for us the ATT must be like a living instrument that involves to address emerging threats and for organized crime to small arms proliferation. So the implementation tools like guidelines developed by civil society, the academia, and the international organizations are crucial for state parties, particularly the new accessions. And this tool enables practical and effective implementation of the treaty obligations. I don't know if many of you probably remember that based upon the Argentinian initiative, we created this Diversion Information Exchange Forum, the DF, that for us is essential for addressing diversion, fostering trust, and sharing best practices among the state parties. And to maximize its impact, the DF must deepen discussions, focus on practical case resolution, and tackle substantive issues. The DF can attract new states to the ATT, especially those struggling with illicit arms trafficking. By addressing the real-world challenges collaboratively, the DF highlights the ATT value as a practical tool. Other point, raising public awareness. I mean, civil society, industry, academia, and regional organizations are critical allies in advancing the ATT objectives. So their engagement and their synergy strengthen monitoring and help prevent the arms misuse. So these partnerships amplify the ATT humanitarian mission to reduce violence, protect civilians, and prioritize human dignity over commercial interest. And it is essential to maintain a people-centered approach. The promoting the ATT to the general public is essential for building broader support, and its objective must be communicated in ways that resonate with everyday people. Digital tools and social media provide unique platform to amplify the treaty and amplify the treaty humanitarian goals, and it's important for peace and security. The ATT principle should be promoted at every opportunity, particularly during meetings and events on related topics, ensuring its relevance is consistently highlighted to the international agenda. And on the other hand, this small arms proliferation continue to destabilize communities and fuel organized crime worldwide. One of the points that for us is really very important to point out is the fact that we have some deficit at the moment. What are these deficits in terms of reaching out people? Look at the ATT Twitter account or social media accounts. Well, you will see practically nothing. Well, we are actually planning, we're working very close with Karina Solmirano to relaunch all the social networks, because one of the points that for us is really very essential is that you not only have to reach governments, you don't only have to reach parliamentarians, but you must reach people. I mean, people should know the existence of the ATT, because this is the base. I mean, the citizens that should see this treaty as a really value asset to actually encourage their representatives, parliamentarians or governments in the executive branch, to sign the agreement or to approve the agreement, because they have to see the virtues of this. For example, as I said before, in Ecuador, I mean, we should do like a marketing, a campaign. We are lack of marketing. People don't know the existence of the ATT, and we want people know the existence of the ATT. The other thing is the following. We are planning for next year in different events to promote the ATT. And I can give you one example. In the sessions of the Human Rights Council, well, this is an opportunity to promote the ATT, because I mean, it's completely, I mean, it is completely engaged one thing with the other. And it is really very important. People know the existence. And I mean, we have many options and ways to promote the ATT during the sessions of the Human Rights Council, for example. So we have banners, or we can promote with videos, or we can do whatever. So we are planning to do so. Aside from the fact that also in different meetings where with different formats or different situations or issues that have been addressed within disarmament, well, we also have to promote this ATT, which haven't been done so far. So we really have to actually have different layers and in different ways, with different strategies to approach the governments, executive branch, I would say, parliamentarians, and people, so that we must cover all this promotion strategy on all these different levels. And as I said, without really dismiss or not take into account the implementation of the treaty, because one thing goes strictly along with the other. So that's why when I decided in Argentina, we decided that universalization would be the focus. Yeah, would be the focus. Doesn't mean that implementation is going to be out of focus. But this is, in general terms, our strategy and our way to see our near future. Unfortunately, it's another problem, which is the fact that we don't have a lot of time. So in actual fact, we're going to have like 5 months, 6 months up to August. But we are going to do as much as we can in the highest possible speed to accomplish all the objectives that we have that are ambitious. But if you are not ambitious, we'll never get anything. So we are really very committed to work very hard. We already started, but we really will accelerate even more with all these different tools and all this on implementing all these ideas that we have for the moment. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to address to you, and specifically within the framework of the Inter-Parliamentarian Union, because all the fact that I said before of the importance of the parliamentarians as a vital piece in this complete puzzle. Thank you very much.
No, we thank you, Ambassador, for these very important points that you raised about universalization. As you said, there are 116 states parties, but we know there are also 26 states that have signed but not ratified, signatories, and this is where probably also some efforts could be made by parliaments to push for ratification, and 53 states that remain outside the treaty, and this is probably where most efforts would be needed. Of course, you mentioned the regional situations, the zones of violence or conflict that makes it more difficult. But as you rightly pointed out, this is a collective responsibility, not only of governments, but also parliament, civil society, academia, industry as well, to promote outreach, better knowledge about the treaty. And as we already know, this is happening in several states parties where civil society realized that the treaty was not fully implemented, or there some exports were authorized by governments without the necessary risk assessment that these weapons would be used to commit war crimes or crimes against humanity, etc. And some court cases were finally adopted so that some of these licenses were cancelled. So as a result of cases brought to courts by civil society organizations. So this is a very important opportunity that exists thanks to the legal base offered by the treaty. I must add that in some other cases, even before a court could make a judgment at the initiative of NGOs, then parliaments sometimes decided to cancel these licenses for exports because they considered that the treaty would be violated. So again, we have this very important role for all the stakeholders. I may also recall that because my role as a member of the Geneva Center for Security Policy was mentioned. This is a niche that we developed even before the entry into force of the treaty to train officials dealing with the implementation of the treaty, as well as other actors, including parliamentarians, civil society activists, etc. And I think that over that time, over the 10 years, we probably have trained over 800, if not more, people, including, by the way, Laurence and Arthur. And I think that we contributed to a better understanding, better respect and implementation of the treaty. And of course, in these courses that now have been actually replaced by a self-paced online course that anybody can take at their own pace anytime. When we had our own in-person or online courses live, Hinway was one of the major contributors as representing control arms, the coalition of NGOs that was behind the treaty. Hinway, of course, has this long experience in security sector governance, also working with the the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, the Implementation Support Unit at the UN, and now with representing control arms through advocacy. She does strengthen this link between decision makers and civil society, highlighting impacts of small arms proliferation, promoting evidence-based action to address arms proliferation and enhance safety worldwide. If you haven't had a chance to attend any of the conferences of states parties, I recommend you do this, because you realize how active civil society can be, sometimes in contrast with diplomats who are maybe a little bit more shy or discreet, but the real issues are raised by civil society organizations like Control Arms. So I'm pleased to give you the floor, Henry.
Well, thanks very much, Mark, and thanks very much for such an introduction. And I'm really delighted to be here with the Inter-Parliamentary Union and such a distinguished lineup of speakers. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to attempt to share it. And now I'll have to reveal what a messy desktop I've got, alas, as I try to find this PowerPoint. Where is my... Has it gone to? I'll do a couple of things. This is terribly embarrassing.
I'm just appearing to let you know that I've put you co-host, so normally you can share your screen without any problem.
Yeah. Here we go. Here we go. Great. Thanks very much. And thanks very much, everybody, for bearing with me as I get underway. And, you would think that I would be better at this after all this time that we've had of being online, etc. So, Mark very clearly set out what the role of Control Arms has been, and that is that we are a global coalition of member organisations from across all regions and from different fields, including fields such as human rights, poverty alleviation, conflict reduction, and weapons specialists. Together we work to support the universalization and effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. And now I'm having got started, I'm now having difficulty moving along. So there we go, Control Arms. Control Arms worked hard to bring about the negotiations of the ATT and to ensure that it really establishes the highest possible common international standards for regulating the international trade in conventional weapons. The ATT brings together what were already well-established principles of human rights, international humanitarian law, and international law. So Ambassador Forodori has, really presented the context and the background to the work that he is doing as president. And I'm just going to go through some key issues such as what weapons does the ATT regulate, and then I'll focus on what are the core provisions, those provisions aimed at preventing irresponsible arms transfers. So moving right along, so here we go. What does the ATT regulate? It regulates the export, import, transit, transshipment, and brokering of conventional weapons. It covers 7 major categories of conventional weapons, including, as you can see there, battle tanks, combat aircraft, warships, and small arms and light weapons. Additionally, something that I should mention is that certain treaty provisions also apply to related ammunition and parts and components. States parties are required to establish and maintain an effective and transparent national control system to regulate the transfer of, at a minimum, these types of weapons and related items that you see before you. So what are the core provisions of the ATT? So these are found in Articles 6 and Article 7. And Article 6 contains what are the prohibitions of the Arms Trade Treaty. And there are 3 prohibitions. The first is it's prohibited to transfer weapons when this would be in violation of Security Council sanctions, or in particular arms embargoes. Second, it's also prohibited to transfer such weapons when it would violate the exporting state's obligations under international agreements. And the third, and perhaps the most significant, is that if at the time of considering and authorizing the transfer of weapons, the exporting state has knowledge that the weapons or items would be used in the commission of genocide, crimes against humanity, grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions, and war crimes, it is prohibited to transfer the weapons. So these are the 3 very clear prohibitions that are set out in the ATT. Now, the other significant article is Article 7, and this contains what we refer to as the ATT risk assessment. And this is an assessment that must be made each time a state party transfers weapons to another state. So in a nutshell, the Article 7 obligates states to assess the risk of conventional weapons transfers undermining peace and security, or, as you will see in 1B, facilitating serious violations of international humanitarian law or international human rights law, or an offence relating to terrorism. If such risks if there are such risks, the exporting state can consider whether there are mitigating measures that could be implemented that would offset these risks. However, once that's been considered, the exporting state still has to make an overall assessment. And if there is an overriding risk of one of the above fields of international law being violated, then the transfer cannot proceed. Now, another interesting aspect of the ATT is that it broke new ground in that it recognised for the first time in a formal instrument of international law the connection between weapons transferred and the issues of gender-based violence and serious violence against women and children. And so these issues must be taken into consideration, as you will see in paragraph 4 of Article 7. So this is Article 7, the risk assessment in a nutshell. And here you see a slide where we've attempted to summarise the risk assessment under the ATT, and also parallel provisions under the UN Programme of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons that very much go in the same direction as the ATT. Now, why is the ATT so important? Why does Control Arms continue to, strongly support this treaty? And this is really an issue that cannot be overstated. Irresponsible arms transfers, illicit trafficking and diversion of arms fuel brutal conflicts and armed violence in many places, including the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Myanmar, the occupied Palestinian territories, Yemen, Sudan, and Ukraine. And these different context, it is civilians who are bearing the brunt of armed conflicts today, and the scale of humanitarian need really is staggering. Just to give you a couple of statistics, the UN recorded a 72% increase of civilian deaths in armed conflicts last year, compared with 2022. And this year, that figure is likely to be much higher. Also, the number of forcibly displaced people reached an unprecedented 120 million in May of this year. The increasing number and brutality of armed conflicts and other situations of violence we are seeing in the world today are fueled by a steady supply of conventional weapons and ammunition. This is against a backdrop of skyrocketing military expenditure. $2.4 trillion US dollars was spent on military goods in 2023. And now I want to be clear that the proliferation and misuse of weapons is fed by both the licit and the illicit trade in weapons. The ATT, again, it aims to ensure that states engage in the arms trade responsibly, recognizing that conventional weapons and ammunition are not just another form of commercial good. By establishing common standards on arms transfers, the ATT holds out the promise of saved lives, unhindered delivery of medical and humanitarian assistance, and strengthened compliance with international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Attacks on civilians, regrettably, are being normalized, but yet the ATT is one tool for turning around this deeply worrying trend. Fulfilling the promise of the ATT requires the concerted efforts of all states, and we're really delighted that Ambassador Forodori has taken up the issue of universalization under his presidency. What's before us is the need to build a strong community of practice where states parties are moving forward together and in the same direction. Parliamentarians can play a key role in building such a community by urging your government to join the treaty, requesting and providing parliamentary oversight on the transfer of weapons, and advocating to ensure that a national control system is established. So thanks very much once again, and I look forward to any questions and comments. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hinwei, as usual, for very detailed and straightforward, right to the point issues that you raised. Of course, the importance of distinguishing between, on the one hand, prohibitions that are very clear and straightforward, and risk assessment, which is an obligation for all exporting states, which may be more complex, but because it sort of requires some anticipation. It requires, of course, collecting information from all the available sources. And once there is this clear risk of misuse of the conventional weapons, then the export shouldn't take place. And this is probably where you can hear most of the criticisms addressed to some exporting states' policies regarding transfers to conflict areas, unstable countries, where even you also mentioned diversion. Diversion is also unfortunately happening sometimes with the let's say lack of serious risk assessment or even complicity of the exporting state, when an importing state re-exports some weapons to, including to non-state actors in zones of conflict, which may, of course, then may be captured by other groups and end up, being used against the exporting states. We've had such cases, in particular in the Middle East. So thank you also for raising the important innovation of the treaty regarding gender-based violence against women and children, which, of course, we are aware are happening, especially in zones of conflict, whether interstate conflict or internal conflict. And these consequences are certainly aggravated by irresponsible arms transfers. So that should be certainly a crucial aspect of the risk assessment by exporting countries. Thank you so much. And because we, of course, mentioned the role of parliamentarians in promoting the treaty and its implementation, it's a real honor to now have with us Honorable Rafael Msunga Chegeni, who is a member of parliament in the National Assembly of Tanzania and the current president of Parliamentary Forum on Small Arms and Light Weapons, an international network supporting parliamentarians in preventing and reducing armed violence. And Dr. Chegeni is also regional chairperson of the Great Lakes Parliamentary Forum on Peace, and he has a doctorate from University of Strathclyde in the UK, and his leadership at the forum has led him to uphold the call for greater parliamentary involvement in the universalization of the Arms Trade Treaty through exchanges of experience and strong advocacy. Of course, he certainly can share his experience from Africa, but let me just also remind that this morning we had a similar webinar for the Asia-Pacific region, where we had also parliamentarians sharing their own experience in that region. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Dr. Chegeni.
Thank you so much, Mark, our moderator. And before I proceed, let me just also thank my two presenters, Carlos and Inway. In fact, they have tried to articulate most of the issues which you're trying to raise here and discuss on this roundtable. Honorable Excellency, Your Excellencies, Honorable Parliamentarians, the distinguished members available for this roundtable discussion. As you have introduced me, I am a president of the forum, the Parliamentary Forum on Small Arms and Light Weapons. That is called the forum, and a member of Parliament from Tanzania. It is my great honor to address you today and to share with my experience on the work done by the forum. First, let me wish to deeply thank the Inter-Parliamentary Union for organizing this important webinar marking the 10th anniversary of the Arms Trade Treaty, which it is a valuable opportunity to reflect on the progress made and the challenge that remains in achieving universalization and effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. Indeed, IPU is a much appreciated partner of the forum with a vital mandate, and the forum is proud as an organization to hold a permanent observer status at the IPU since late 2021. Therefore, the forum is the only membership-based organization gathering parliamentarians globally across party political lines, specifically related to the reduction and prevention of small arms and light weapons-related violence. It is an organization constituted by and for the parliamentarians working for sustainable development, human security, and peace building. The organization gathers more than 350 parliamentarians from approximately 100 plus countries globally. Could see how big is the forum is engaged. The armed conflict and violence, as you have pointed out, Africa is one of the worst, one of the prone, one of the victim of these small armed military weapons. You know, armed conflicts and violence, independent of their scale, are perpetuated by uncontrolled availability of small military weapons, increasing the need for concise and effective steps to tackle its proliferation. The issue here is about proliferation. I think my previous speakers have just mentioned all this one. So there's an issue because you have porous borders in Africa. So the entrance of these illicit small arms and light weapons are there in big numbers. So over 1 billion small arms and light weapons are circulating globally, of which approximately 85% are in civilian hands. And as confirmed by the Small Arms Survey, resulting in 260,000 men, women, and children losing their lives in small arms and related violence, and injuring many more. It is pity to know that over the past decade, the Armed Trade Treaty has served as a cornerstone in global effort to regulate the trade in conventional arms and prevent the illicit flow of small arms and light weapons. With 116 state parties, the Armed Trade Treaty has made significant strides, but universalization and implementation remains incomplete, and that's the challenge lies along. And also, the misconception about the treaty persists, especially in regions most affected by small arms related violence, as I mentioned, like in Africa. Therefore, in light of this, parliamentarians have a critical role to play in addressing the said challenges through our legislative oversight and awareness-raising functions. We can shape policies, promote ratification, and ensure governments meet their commitments under the Armed Trade Treaty. However, our role is often overlooked, and this must change to fully maximize the potential of said functions. Through its capacity developing, policy shaping, and awareness activities, and tools such as adopted parliamentary action plan by parliamentarians, the forum continually strives to promote concrete actions to advance the universalization and implement of the ATT by fostering collaboration and equipping parliamentarians with relevant knowledge. Because without the knowledge, you can't do much. And you know, the parliamentarian cycle is about maybe 4 or 5 years cycle. After that, you have new members coming in. So there must be continuing engagement and knowledge imparting. An example was the international seminar organized with the Inter-Parliamentary Union in December in Geneva. That was last year, in which I had the opportunity to participate. During the event, key recommendations for parliamentary action concerning the armed trade treaties implementation and the universalization with link to the women, peace and security agenda were identified and included together with recommendation from our activities in Asia, Latin America and the Caribbean and the Middle East into a concluding policy publication, which was launched at a side event in the 10th Conference of State Parties on the 21st August this year, in cooperation with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada. This was an achievement, that's which, of course, we did it. In light of this, I would like to highlight the following recommendations, which are very, very pertinent to a discussion I'm trying to put before you. First, we should look into 3 major areas: the registration, which is very important, the oversight, which is very important, and awareness raising. On the registration, we need to have an inclusive of the gender equality and the youth perspective, where working with the legislation regarding small bilateral control, both in terms of content in the legislation as well as promoting women's and the youth's participation and leadership role in the legislation process. This is very important. And secondly, we need to integrate small arms and light weapons action plan into national development strategies, because without integrating them to the national development strategy, it can be more difficult to have the results. So including in the national action plan about the women, peace, security agenda is also needed. And thirdly, we have to enhance engagement with a variety of stakeholders, such as civil society, agencies, and the government, including through consultation related to the drafting process of new legislation or amendments of small arms related process and the women, peace, and security agenda, as well as evaluation as to ensure inclusion of a wider range of perspective and effective implementation. On the oversight side, we need to promote the use of parliamentarian control tools to improve the implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty and encourage the adoption of related gender responsive public policies and strategies. We have to stay informed by seeking the advice from civil society. There's no way you can work without having civil society inclusive. So this means that the civil society organization and the research institute in the oversight tasks, as these can provide expertise, experience, and voice issues. They are one who can issue the expertise. They are one who can also assist in the experience and even voice issues, raising up the voices. And thirdly, form regional interparliamentary commission with the objective of monitoring regional trade on small arms light weapons and harmonizing of national registrations. We have to harmonize, otherwise you can't do it. And lastly is awareness raising. In this aspect, we want to have an approach where parliamentarian leadership means the presidents, committee chairpersons, group leaders, etc., to include the issues of signing, ratification, signing, ratifying, and implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty on the agenda. These through the committees, the presidents, the chairpersons, and the group leaders have to be involved to make sure that the signing, ratification, and the implementation of the ATT is being done on the agenda. And also, we need to promote the development of formal and informal cross-part groups. This networking makes more effective, and it is more and more of importance to raise awareness on small arms light weapon related violence and the champion relevant instruments. Lastly, on the awareness, we need to disseminate to the public reports, policy statements, and relevant data on small arms light weapons related violence, and the importance of ratification and implementation of the ATT through the media. Because the media is the fourth arm of governance. So the media should be well involved to make sure that it gives them information to the public. Now, kindly also note that we have additional resources available on our website regarding parliamentary action. As the forum, the parliamentary forum on small arms light weapons, we are rich on so many information. So if we ever want to have this more information, we invite him or her to contact our secretariat for more information, where it can be available, and there could be more resources for anyone to have some more on this aspect. Lastly, let me mention that I'm looking forward, we must commit to continue to address barriers that hinder the ATT further universalization and the effective implementation, including breaking down myth about the treaty. There's a myth about the treaty, so we need to work on that very, very strongly. And also further strengthening the role of parliamentarians in promoting universalization and implementation as to contribute to more peaceful and sustainable development societies. Let me thank you so much for this brief presentation, but I think be ready to open up for any other questions or comments from the floor. But basically, we say that you have members of parliament and you have parliamentarians. Let's be converted to be more parliamentarians, because parliamentarians have the vision, have the means, and have the aspect. But being a member of parliament, anyone can become a member of parliament with no results. I thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chigeni, for also these very important points and in sharing the experience and the role of the important role of the Parliamentary Forum. As everyone may have noticed, you may access the Parliamentary Forum report that has been shared in the chat in several languages. And that is, again, a testimony of the important work in terms of outreach and coordination done by your forum. You raised, of course, a very important role. Of course, also you mentioned the role of the IPU, and I should have also recalled the 2006 resolution by the IPU that really sort of played a triggering role for the process of a later adoption of the ATT. And basically, you described all the traditional functions of parliaments that can be put to the service of better universalization, implementation of the treaty, such as working to prevent illicit trafficking, and this can be done also through regional cooperation, within regional parliamentary assemblies, or in bilateral or regional contexts, in areas where some countries, some parliaments are more advanced than others, and you can share the experience. For instance, in legislative assistance, it's important, of course, that once states have signed and ratified a treaty or acceded to it, then they, of course, adopt the proper legislation to implement their obligations. And we have good examples like New Zealand, the home country of Inouye, who's offered in its regions, in Pacific region, to share sort of standard law for states to adjust to their needs and adopt. And of course, you also mentioned important role of parliaments in oversight of government, in awareness raising, along with civil society and the media. And finally, all the important points you made about the process of women, peace and security, which is, of course, very relevant in countries that have been affected by conflict and therefore need, again, to develop activities such as disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, or security sector reform that, of course, will also have an impact on arms transfers, regulations of imports, prevention of illicit trafficking, etc. So thank you so much for all these important points. And again, I recommend everyone to download the publications of the forum. Now the floor is open for any questions or comments from the audience. This is a unique opportunity. You may ask questions to the panelists. Again, you may not have this chance anytime soon, so don't be shy. If you prefer, you can write your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand so that we can give you the floor. So again, you use all the facilities in the chat or raising your hand. You may, of course, ask a question, but you also can share your own experience in your country, in your parliament, or in your organization in terms of contribution to the universalization or implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. Well, that seems to indicate that everyone is satisfied with the statements by the speakers. They have learned everything. They don't have any specific question. Yes, we have a hand risen by Miss LaRouche from Canada, I suppose.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Oui.
Oui, merci. Donc, si nos intervenants peuvent comprendre ma question, il y a un aspect qui peut être inquiétant sur le trafic d'armes et on voit qu'avec la multiplication des conflits à travers le monde, en fait, j'essaie de voir parce que j'ai l'impression que ça fait en sorte il est plus difficile d'aller chercher de l'aide et de s'entraider parce que le nombre de conflits demande aux États de s'impliquer à différents endroits. Dans ce contexte, j'ai l'impression que l'on dilue les énergies que l'on peut mettre à aider certains pays, certaines zones en conflit. Quel choix l'on fait, sur quel choix on se base. Donc, ça devient difficile aussi d'avoir ce contrôle illicite des armes, pardon, le contrôle des armes illicites. Donc, j'essaie de voir comment est-ce qu'on peut réussir à être efficace avec le nombre de conflits qui est en augmentation et en croissance.
Mark, unfortunately,
Mark,
you're muted.
you're mute.
Sorry. Thank you very much for your question. And will any of the panelists wish to answer that?
Mark, I'd be happy to say a few words about this question. You know, like it is true that the illicit trafficking and diversion of weapons is becoming more complex. But also, it's also true on the other side that organizations, NGOs and academics and states themselves understand a lot more about how weapons are being trafficked and what can be done to prevent the illicit trafficking and diversion of weapons. So it is an area where there's a very alive and vibrant community, and there is there has been a lot of attention put into research and also into capacity building for officials. One issue that is perhaps a neglected issue under the ATT, and that is about the transit and transshipment of weapons. And slowly there is a community of practice that is being built that is understanding, what are some of the key and basic measures that states can take to control the transit and transshipment of weapons through their territories and waters, and also to discuss and learn lessons from what has been effective and what hasn't been. So, I agree. I certainly agree with you that about the scope of the challenge ahead of us. But I would say that all is not lost, that there is a lot being done in response.
Thank you very much, Heinwei. Yes, Dr. Cingini would like to add something.
Yeah. I think my fellow panelist here in Hawaii, she just said it all. But we have a challenge, which is a resource-based challenge. You know, Africa has been prone, and most of the states or the governments sometimes are reluctant to effect to take control of the importation of the illicit trafficking of these small arms electric ones. And you know, the transshipment is also one of the case because those countries who are bordering on the sea, or the port of the sea, and the hinterland countries, they also act on that. So the transshipment also makes it a bit more difficult because once is a cargo coming from Tanzania, for instance, going to DRC Congo, this is belong to the government of Congo. Whether it's genuine or not genuine, there's a problem. So there's an issue of need for collaboration and intense collaboration of the state actors, including the governments, to make sure that they control the transshipment and even the importations of the smart electric ones. But at the end of the day, when it goes to the affected area, people are most affected, the women, children, and those who are not vulnerable for that. So I think she raised a very good point of concern that both instruments require states to take effective measures to regulate the import of these moderatory funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tegeni. Yes, of course, there are plenty of methods and instruments that are actually spelled out in the treaty. And of course, when we try and train officials in implementing the treaty, we give them recommendations how to use these instruments. Of course, they cover the whole spectrum of transfers, import, export, transshipment, transit, and brokering as well, where you need to have in place a strong, robust legal system, of course, that also requires resources. And this is why there is an obligation for the most advanced countries to cooperate with those that need this support and cooperation. And that is precisely designed to reduce the risk of illicit trafficking, sometimes in countries that have huge borders, porous borders. But again, the whole chain of supply has to be addressed. And that, of course, involves cooperation between the exporting states and the importing states and the transit states, and also industry, because this is something that really is a very interesting development thanks to the treaties, that industry realizes that it is in its interest to take part in preventing illicit trafficking, because it's bad for its image, its corporate responsibility, and therefore, this should be a joint effort. Yes, Ambassador Foddery.
First of all, thank you so much for the question. I think it's very, very important. But one thing that I want to point out is what I said at the very beginning of my intervention. We are not satisfied with the situation of the ATT at the moment. I mean, don't get it wrong. I mean, we have only, at this point, we are, if we can say, celebrating the 10 years of the ATT, which is very young. And we have 116 countries that are members, but there's still this long way to go. And if you pay attention to what I said at the very beginning, I clearly said that still there's a gap remaining in regulating global arms trade flows. So we are doing this diagnosis, all these problems, all these critical situations that we are facing at the moment, and one by one, we are trying to resolve it. But we are not, happy with the situation. I told you very clearly before of the fact that we are trying to encourage and trying to relaunch the social networks, I mean, to promote it, to make more marketing of the ATT and so on and so forth, but also in implementation. I mean, for you to have an idea, in 2 weeks ago in Siem Reap, during the course of the 5th review conference of the Convention of Ottawa, had nothing to do with anti-personal mines and everything, but still, I mean, I used my intervention in the first place to promote the ATT in front of everybody. There are many members of the Southeast Asia, for example. And also in my final intervention, I also emphasized the ATT. But on top of that, what we did is distribute, just to have an idea, it's a detail, flyers. I mean, in every single table of each representative. So in other words, there's a lot of things to do with the ATT. We are very conscious of that. Implementation is one of the problems that we have to face. I mean, we are not going to hide that, quite the opposite. We have to highlight in order to resolve it. But I mean, we're trying to see at the same time, you know, that we had done already a lot. But does not necessarily means that we are like happy, satisfied, okay, we can sleep in laurels. I mean, not at all. I mean, we are really very conscious, we're really committed to face all these problems, to solve it, and to put as much as we can in order to hopefully facing them and resolving them one by one. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Actually, I have...
Mark?
Yes.
Just to add on, Mark.
Sorry?
I was, yes.
Mr.
Are you
Chigini?
there?
Yes, of course. Yes, please.
Just to add on what Mr. Carlson just mentioned, Ambassador Carlson just mentioned, we need to strengthen and make sure that these parliamentary bodies, like the IPU, the Parliamentary Forum on Small Relative Weapons, are fully engaged and they're given the mandate and the resources also to articulate issues and make sure that the states concerned, they also be adhered to the ATT. Otherwise, you know, if the governments are not willing to do that, there must be a pressure from the champions of the parliamentary side who should also push, because the parliamentarians are the ones who are allocating budget to the governments. So we need to intensify the issues of parliamentarians to work on this and support the ATT process. I thank you.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Chigini. Very important point. I was going actually to ask you, to ask the panelists a question, because you all talk about the importance of universalization, the need to you know, outreach and sometimes put pressure on governments so that they can finally ratify the treaty when they have signed it, or accede to it when they haven't. But in the end, we see that there is some resistance. And perhaps I'd like to have your analysis on how to overcome this form of resistance, these roadblocks. Of course, you know, you can have one argument that would say that, you know, this probably was used initially by some of the big either exporting countries or importing countries. They were perhaps motivated by the fear that they would not be able to either export or import as much as they thought, you know, they could, and they thought that the treaty would be an obstacle to their transfers. Now we can just look at the statistics. You know, in over 10 years, international trade in conventional arms has been booming. It's been increasing every year. You know, now it's over $100 billion, roughly, depending on how you count. But of course, we can refer to the good database of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, CIPRI. But if you look at the most recent years, for instance, you see that key exporting countries that are party to the ATT, like France, UK, Germany, Italy, although they were party to the treaty, they have seen their exports increasing, while a country like Russia, who is not party to the treaty, has seen its exports drastically reduced. There may be, of course, other reasons, but just to say that apparently being party to the ATT is not a real obstacle to being a responsible arms exporter or importer. How do you respond to this?
Well, Mark, perhaps I bravely go into this territory that you've laid out. That it is fact that it is a reality that we're in a very grim moment, and especially now with what's happened in the US election, we have to accept the reality that the US is not going to join the treaty anytime soon, and it's a question. It's also another question that we often have come up, and that is that states ask, why should I join when the US and Russia haven't joined? The two largest exporters, although there are questions about Russia's exports in the world. And the issue about compliance under the ATT is a very serious issue. And this year, in the 10th year of the treaty, we finally saw the first formal discussion on a case of compliance. It's like any treaty, though. All instruments of international law are challenged, and the main thing is that we have this set of norms and obligations and rules in place, and it provides an instrument for the responsible regulation of the arms trade. And this is not an easy moment, but the ATT is a dynamic instrument, especially, and it is unique in arms control in that at the domestic level in countries, formal litigation has actually been taken against government decisions to transfer weapons. Also, this is an issue that is now frequently addressed at the Human Rights Council, and a number of UN human rights experts have spoken out on these issues. Just something else I would want to say, and that I would want to come back to, and that is about building a strong community of practice and going against the trend of simply transferring weapons to everybody, but trying to bring about responsibility. This idea of building a community of practice is not new. It's happened under the Convention on Anti-Personnel Mines, and so too it can happen under the ATT. It's a big challenge that we have ahead of us. All is not well, but also, I refuse to believe that all is lost. There is much work to be done.
Thank you. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Yes, Dr.
I'm there.
J.
Yeah, well, there's an issue of supply and demand, which is the driven factor for most of the African states. It's about power. So there's a connection between the power mongers in Africa and the supplier from the other side. So there's the issue which, of course, you need to be worked very hard and strongly to win it. Otherwise, there's this kind of conflict. That's why signing for African states is not a problem. Ratification is a problem. Because when they ratify it, they may be just engaged and the strictest controlled. But now, we need now to unlock this kind of scenarios. And I think you have just pointed it out. We need to work it all very hard and make sure that the oversight instruments are being put in place and are being supported, whether by knowledge, by resources, by any support. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's really part of the traditional functions of parliaments to oversee what governments do or do not do. and of course also rely on fact-based evidence. For instance, you may have heard that one of the arguments by the Trump administration to withdraw support for the ATT was the reference to the internal gun regulation. While obviously this is completely irrelevant as an argument, because the treaty is only about international transfers and not about internal domestic regulation, which is, of course, is left to each individual state as a sovereign right. So it's important for parliamentarians, along with civil society NGOs like Control Arms, to continue to spread the truth and the reality about arms transfers. And of course, they sometimes they have to be critical to their governments, but this is part of democracy and rule of law and democratic control and oversight. Of course, again, we have a diversity of situations. As Dr. Chigani said, there are some, of course, regional situations connected with conflicts, and sometimes it's important for regional countries that have joined the treaty and make the effort to implement it, also try and interact with the other members of the region that haven't crossed that step. And so I just remember the example of Senegal, where with GCSP used to organize a training course on the ATT in French for the whole region or French-speaking countries in Africa. Senegal was one of the first to sign and ratify and work on its domestic legislation. And then it, of course, consulted with experts, domestic, international, and consulted with its other regional countries to showcase what could be done. And then they have conducted this legislative assistance to other states that help them decide to join the treaty. So again, this is something that can be done, not necessarily with the big absence, the big exporting or importing countries, but certainly with some of the regional countries that may have not joined, for reasons, related to their situation or lack of resources or lack of knowledge, simply. Any other question or comment? If not, I may just flag to you one of the latest publications by IPU called Human Security and Common Security to Build Peace. Again, you can download it from the chat or from the website of the IPU. Of course, it's not only about the ATT, but it includes, of course, arms transfers and arms proliferation and illicit trafficking, and as one of the challenges to human security that can have an impact on societies, populations, well-being, and most particularly of the most vulnerable members of societies, women, children, people with disabilities, etc. So just to mention this very important publication, which can be a useful tool in wherever you work, in your parliament, in your NGO, or in your government. And if there is no more question or comment, I will just have to thank the panelists for their very invaluable contributions to our collective knowledge, collective wisdom, and capacity to deal with these important challenges. And so, of course, with the ATT as one of the tools to address these security challenges. Again, with its main objective, of course, to increase security, but also reduce human suffering, which is, again, one of its stated purposes. So thank you so much. And if the panelists don't have anything to add, we could close the session.
Thank you
all for
Thank you
your...
very much, Mark, and thank you to the interpretation. Thank you to the panelists and to all the participants that joined us. This webinar was recorded and will be available on the IPU website by the end of next week. So once again, thank you, Mark, for all your work, all your dedication, and for sharing all your expertise. And thank you to Mr. Chigini, Mr. Foradori, and Ms. Luz. Again, we truly appreciate your support and your continued engagement with this incredibly important task of ATT universalization.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for giving the chance to address to this important event. And you know that you can count on me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And just to build on what Arthur just said, so this webinar has been recorded. It will be on the IPU website, and we will make sure that it goes to all parliaments, especially those that have something to do when it comes to the ATT ratification.
Thanks very much, everyone. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, everyone. It was my pleasure to meet you all. And I wish you welcome to Tanzania.
Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to the IPU. Thank you to the interpreters. And best wishes to all.